Take your time, you bastard!
When The Young Ones exploded onto our screens in 1982, its unique brand of anarchic slapstick, potty-mouthed humour,
Get out of my head, poo-hole!
and surrealist asides
We're just the fly-on-the-wall documentary film crew, OK, love?
gave British comedy a great big kick up the arse.
4 horrible characters.
Do I smell?
Yes. Bitching and fighting.
I'm not allergic! I am not allergic!
Farting their way through life.
Over the next 2 hours, we'll be looking at how it redefined the comedy rulebook.
I only said I was a pacifist.
It was like they'd sort of come into the BBC like a bunch of vandals.
Safe studio sitcoms would never be the same again.
BBC did comedy well, but this was something different. It was.
That I did not expect.
We were literally just going, we're going to do a sitcom, but we're going to do it our way.
We'll also reveal for the first time on British television some scenes from the cutting room floor we were never meant to see.
I did notice that it was mostly Adrian, wasn't it? Messing up, really.
And explore how the Young Ones' comedy revolution still reverberates today.
Nobody move! And nothing will happen!
We were the first of a new kind of comedy, and so all the other performers have kind of followed on from us, really.
Sticks and stones may break my bones! That is the first sensible thing you have said all day!
I don't think you could have helped but be influenced by the Young Ones. It just explode in such a way, and every young person watched it and felt it was for them.
Look out! Cliff!
It just feels really exciting and a little bit dangerous.
Phew! That was close!
You just can't make TV like that anymore.
Manchester University, 1979. And drama students Ade Edmondson and Rick Mail are in their final year, spending most of their time either partying or dreaming up avant-garde performance comedy.
And Manchester University at the time was full of kind of creative people in a kind of arty way or a political way, and we were definitely the lower brow. With quite a lot of violence, quite a lot of Beckett-y type stuff in it. That was our spectrum, really.
Creating a comedy group with 3 other students, Rick and Ade would perform at the university's student union and in local venues.
There was 5 lads, me and Rick, and then 2 friends of his from his hometown, Mike Redfern and Mark Jewison. And then Ade came along quite late.
But we were called 20th Century Coyote, as a pun on 20th Century Fox. Some really bad jokes.
It was part of that kind of anarchic, anything kind of goes atmosphere of the time.
But we sort of developed a kind of bond of playing together, myself and Rick especially. And we sort of went on to become a double act. And in that first year, we kind of always thought that we'd be an act. But there wasn't a kind of circuit for this kind of thing. The only thing that existed was the kind of working men's club circuit.
I tell you what, there's not many Pakistanis knocking about since the Chinese have found out they taste like chicken. Have you noticed?
Stand-up was abominable. It had been kind of taken over by working men's clubs. Most stand-ups were just appalling, racist, sexist, just and banal.
This coloured boy, this is true. He was fed up. He was fed up. He said, man, I am blown up with this country.
It felt, I think even at the time, was feeling very, very old-fashioned, almost like a dying art form, a dying way of doing things.
I'm going on holiday, just to get a bit of colour.
Comedy had been either people in Dickie Bows doing mother-in-law and vaguely racist material, or it had been Oxbridge people doing very clever stuff.
The 2 extremes of TV comedy at the time were the university comedy typified by Monty Python and then the Bernard Manning-style working men's club. But most of comedy at that time that viewers saw was the bland domestic sitcom.
We'd had The Good Life and all these sort of very charming, gentle sitcoms where people loved each other and lived in nice houses.
All a million miles from sleazy Soho, the breeding ground for the comedy revolution to come.
I suppose we moved to London about a year or two after we left uni. At the same time, the Comedy Store opened.
In 1979, an insurance salesman called Peter Rosengard put out ads calling for new acts, hired a strip joint for 2 nights a week, and started Britain's first alternative comedy venue.
The opening night, Clive Anderson was there and a few other people from Footlights. I think Emma Thompson was there and Sandy Tosford, and they did some sort of act, sketchy kind of act.
Everything that we do flows entirely from off the cuff.
But then most of the people were just kind of nuts.
What's something?
At the very beginning, there were all sorts of bits of comedy. There were people who had other jobs, and quite some of them not young.
I've only got 5 minutes, even the wife gives me 6. Listen, shut up. Well, when a fella's talking, shut up.
Mixed in with people fresh out of university or from not going to university.
Can you hear me? No. Right, this is... Right.
Quite a good mishmash. I liked it best in its early days when they were sort of good, bad and indifferent and quite anarchic in the same way.
You get the oxtail soup and you'd have a can open under your bed. You'd get it out and you'd open it in of oxtail soup and you'd pour just a little bit of it on your legs, wouldn't you, like that? And then you'd pull your goggles down and you'd pour most of it in your wellies and then you'd jump up and down, wouldn't you? And you'd bang your head on the wall and you'd shout at yourself in Welsh, Yaki-da, Yaki-da, Yaki-da!
The first time me and Rick went there, Alexei was trying some new material and he was awful. He came on and pretended to take the audience hostage with a gun. No one laughed.
I just bombed horribly. And then the act that was on after me was Rick and Aid.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Open the door.
They just got this amazing reception partly because they weren't that drunk, frightening man with the gun.
Open the door. Open the door, please. I want to come in. Open the door, please. I want to come in. You just open the blooming door.
They were definitely distinctive, and you could. I'm reluctant to say I could say they were going places because I can never work out who's going to be good and bad. But they were a popular pair of performers from the word go.
Another double act, Nigel Planer and Peter Richardson, had toured their show Rank, where they played over 40 characters, but were struggling to find venues willing to put it on in London.
When the Comedy Store opened, we went down there and did our act for a pint, I think it was, or 2. And we were pretty much taken with it from there, from that night, and we wrote loads of material, devised our act, The Outer Limits.
Good evening, we are The Outer Limits. Yeah. So, relax.
And that's where we met Rick and Aid.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to tell the Gooseberry joke. What is it? I told him. Right. Okay. What is it when there's a man and a lady who don't want to have a baby, but they want to do the bits upstairs, they want to play babies, so they've got a rubber Gooseberry bush, which is trembling with fright, because they're trembling with fright, shaking the Gooseberry bush, which shakes it, all right, which shakes a gooseberry off, hits one of the buttons, and the lift goes up and down.
Goes up and down.
What's that? A gooseberry, yeah!
People from television were coming down and watching them and trying to work out if they could do anything with them. And Paul Jackson, who was quite a young producer at the time, had his finger on the pulse and had seen all of them and thought, I really want to do something with this new alternative comedy which is happening.
Boom, boom!
We set up a stage, cabaret style, had the audience, and we recorded the first Boom Boom Out Go the Lights.
My name's Vic, okay?
It was to be the first time the nation would be exposed to the intense poetry of Rick.
Theatre! What are you, theatre?
Whenever I'm near to the theatre, Shut up!
And also the guitar-strumming hippie, Neil, played by Nigel Planer.
Hello. Can you hear me? OK.
But producer Paul Jackson wasn't convinced the double acts, which also featured Ade Edmondson and Peter Richardson, would be right for TV.
I was very, very new. I mean, I produced it really badly. You know, I didn't include either Ade or Peter Richardson, which was really a stupid thing to do and completely my fault and caused a lot of issues later on.
At some point, maybe because of the Boom Boom Out Go the Lights or something, Peter had a falling out with Paul Jackson.
I think they had a minor falling out. Retrospectively, we can look back and make more of it maybe than there was.
Boom Boom also showcased many of the alternative comedians who would go on to perform in The Young Ones and the comic strip, including Keith Allen, Tony Allen.
This drunk homosexual Pakistani squatter takes my mother-in-law to an Irish restaurant.
And Alexei Sale.
You know, I'm trying to articulate all them thoughts us mods have, you know, like, duh.
It wasn't a very successful show, was it, Boom Boom Out Go the Lights, I don't think?
It failed to capture the excitement of what we were doing in the clubs. You know, bottle that raw energy, I think, really.
Lisa Mayer had known Rick in his student days, and they were, by now, partners.
We watched this programme go out, and we just thought the joy of stand-up is the live experience, and it's not meant for television. So we sort of had this inkling of an idea to do a sitcom.
Also at Manchester Uni with Rick and Ade, though 2 years below, was Ben Elton. Already known as a prolific comedy writer, a chance meeting between Rick and Ben would change the course of comedy history.
Good evening, my name's Kevin Turvey. And here's a good one. Why does Mrs. Thatcher always wear barbed wire underwear? She doesn't. It's a joke.
It's 1981, and Rick Mayall is beginning to make a name for himself as the roving investigator Kevin Turvey, while he and his partner Lisa Mayer have had an idea for a new comedy show about 4 students living in a rundown house.
We talked about the idea of a house where you could see each act in their rooms, but nobody really knew how to do it until Rick and Lisa came up with the actual idea for The Young Ones. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be students. Alexei's going to be the landlord. And we then had a form.
Rick and I were sitting around in the saloon bar starting to write the pilot of The Young Ones. And Ben turned up. And Rick just went, Ben, you know, we should get Ben to do it with us. Ben's a really quick writer, which is obviously the attribute that you most wanted then. So we went, sure, you know, let's do it together.
No, there was you, there was Lisa who was also going to be writing it, and we discussed this idea and put it together that night. And that very night, this was typed. I went home.
This is it?
This is it. This is the young one. This is the pilot episode. This is the pilot episode.
Ben wrote a first draft script, and he came round to my flat. I can remember reading it. I thought, this is absolutely brilliant. And I can remember going back to my wife and saying, he's made a script out of it, or he's done it. He's got all the different elements. It's all in there. And we've got to do it. It's brilliant. I mean, she'll testify. I came away saying, God, if I'm not in that, I'm going to slip my wrists.
We had this idea for the sitcom, and the only person that we knew in television was Paul Jackson, who had done Boom Boom Out Go the Lights.
Rick came to me and said, we're thinking of writing a sitcom. Would you have a look at it? And so he gave me this script written in biro on A4 with, I always remember, a big coffee stain on the front page. And I read it and I loved it. I just loved it.
Pilot episode, first draft, January 1981. I'm practically shaking.
And so come on, let's read a bit. Read the first, see if you do. Let's see. Hang on,
okay.
Here we go. All right. So
this is the original.
Yes, this was it. Okay, so Rick is dancing, right? Okay.
Rick is dancing. That was brilliant. Pity about Cliff Richard.
I'll be Neil.
What about him?
He's holding the lentils.
What? What about Cliff Richard? Are you trying to be funny? Because if you are, I think it's in pretty poor taste, that's all. I'm not a fridge, you know.
First gag. Nobody got it, but it was fabulous.
Shame about Cliff Richard.
What about him?
What?
What about Cliff Richard?
You trying to be funny? Because if you are, I think it's in pretty poor taste, that's all. I'm not a fridge, you know.
We shot the pilot, and we were all very pleased with it. We really, I mean, not least we were pleased that we'd managed to make the script work.
Oh, no! That plane is going to crash on us!
Paul showed it to the people upstairs, and they didn't understand it. And they got Ben to write an essay. That was the word used, to write an essay explaining why it was funny. Because they couldn't see it.
The bosses at the BBC didn't think revolutionary poets,
It was off the floor.
lentil-hugging hippies and psychotic medical students was for them, so they decided to put the pilot on the shelf. But then...
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to say to you, welcome to Channel 4.
We'd been commissioned by the thrusting, as yet to start, Channel 4, who were sort of hungry for material, which was lucky for us.
Channel 4's remit as the new kid on the TV block was to offer alternative entertainment, and Peter Richardson's comedy collective, The Comic Strip, was the perfect fit.
Thanks, Anne. You really are a proper little housewife. Not like George. She still thinks she's a boy.
I think it's stupid being a girl. I wish I was a boy.
Really, George? It's about time you gave up thinking you're as good as a boy.
The Comic Strip was a loose band of writers and performers, including Rick, Aid, Nigel, and the relatively unknown female double act, French and Saunders.
Steady on, you two. The holes have only just started.
You seem so grown up, Julian.
The BBC was made nervous by the approach of Channel 4, and they decided that they had better, in that dreadful metaphor that was used at that time by BBC executives, and still occasionally is, that Auntie would have to let her bloomers down a bit.
And I suddenly got this phone call saying, aren't they those people that are in your show? And I said, yeah. And they said, could you get a series together?
And on the 9th of November 1982, perhaps slightly unaware of what it was about to unleash on Russell Harty's audience, the BBC Listings magazine warned viewers to be there or be square.
Once in every lifetime comes a love like this. Oh, I need you, you need me. Oh, my darling, can't you see?
The pilot was broadcast as the first of 6 episodes shown the week after Channel 4 went on air. And a new chapter in comedy history was written.
And the young ones came in, it was just this burst of energy, for want of a better word, anarchism. I mean, you could see it. They would just threw everything into that show.
I've got a leg!
Hey, Bibby, and that's not unusual.
No, look. I'm supposed to write an essay on it, right? But I think I'm just going to stick it on the bonnet of my car.
Around that time, there was a bit of a vacuum when it comes to what kids of a certain age found funny on television. And the young ones just completely filled that gap. It is stupid, it is facile, but it's ours and it's funny, and my parents don't really like it. That means I'm going to like it even more.
It's new and exciting, and it's young people just doing it for themselves, exactly what they want to do. And really, the young ones was the first time you saw that happening on TV. It was like they'd sort of come into the BBC like a bunch of vandals.
It's got the letterbox.
And were just doing their own thing. And, you know, as a young person, I had been a student. Suddenly, here was a programme you felt was being made for you.
We are students after all. We're old enough to vote. We're old enough to do things to girls. We can go to prison. We can drive. Last week I even got into an X film, for Christ's sake.
We were basically channeling our acts, and Pete was supposed to be playing the kind of fixer, which is what he played in the act with Outer Limits.
We had intended the character of Mike to be played by Peter Richardson. And then at some point, maybe because of the Boom Boom Out Go the Lights or something, Peter had a falling out with Paul Jackson.
I was led to believe that Peter would never do the series if I was in charge. I think there is a possibility, I know no more, but I think it may be that Peter was led to believe that I wouldn't have him in the show, which was not true. I wanted him in the show because not having him in the show presented was a major problem. So we had to cast.
We actually nearly gave the part to Timothy Spall, who did an absolutely brilliant reading. But they just decided that facially he and Nigel were too similar, and they both had that hangdog thing going on. And then we went to see a play called Can't Pay, Won't Pay, which was on in the West End, and Chris Ryan was in it, and he was absolutely brilliant. So we thought, you know, we found our Mike.
Did a guy with a lisp phone?
No one phoned you, Mike. Well, we haven't got a telephone.
Yeah. He came in with that character he's got, which is kind of different from how I'd originally seen it. He went out the room. He said, OK, I'll come back in. And he went out the room and we thought, oh, where's he gone? And then he came back in, like, transformed, and said, no, here, you go there, you go there. And we were all like, oh, shit. Shit. That's the guy.
The sheet's all sticky.
Oh, it's probably just the red paint.
OK, Neil. It may seem heavy-handed for £1.50, but when I lend somebody money, I expect to get it back. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't know any of this, any of the fact that Peter Richardson was going to be doing it.
Well, Neil, I want that £1.50 by Wednesday, otherwise another moose dies.
It was just this new thing. And then, as I became involved, I could see how much of a group these people were, how much of a unit they were, and what a different world it was that I was coming into.
It was difficult for Chris coming into this, you know, very cliquey group of people, many of whom had known each other for years. And, you know, when you've been students together, you have an understanding. And even those that hadn't, they'd worked together.
I think Chris, you know, gets as many laughs as anybody else. And also, I think with another comic in there, with 5 comics in there, it would have overbalanced it, really. And so it's, because Chris was an actor, he provided a kind of solidity to that part, I think.
I never knew there was so much in it.
Chris is very funny. I love Chris, and I think he's a brilliant performer. I don't think Mike is the best character that's ever been written, you know, and but he fulfills a very important function, which is, you know, in that house there needed to be a parent, and he is the parent.
Coming up, we uncover the truth about the mysterious 5th housemate, whom most viewers and even some of the cast missed first time around.
Everyone talks about this 5th housemate. I don't remember it because I didn't even know it was there in the first place.
Welcome back, as we find out how 4 students from Scumbag College shook the comedy world.
Look at us. Squabbling. Bickering. Like children.
These were not characters people had seen before on TV, and certainly not in sitcoms. So it upset some people that people were being so cruel and nasty to each other. But they were all adorable, and everybody loved them.
One of the characteristics of the characters, they were full of opinions without really having any idea of what was actually going on in the world.
None more so than the people's poet and revolutionary sociology student, Rick.
Pollution. All around. Sometimes up. Sometimes down. But always around.
I love the vulnerability of Rick's character.
You've bought me a present. What is it? What do you do with it?
Ludicrously vain and full of himself. He's obviously a rubbish poet. He's obviously not studying very much.
It's a telescope! A telescope with a mouse in it!
He's obviously turned up at university at Scumbag College and thinks, right, I'm an anarchist and I want society to be radically reimagined.
Are these lentils South African?
Well...
You bastard! You complete and utter bastard! Why didn't you just go out and become a policeman? Become a police!
And then when you scratch into the surface, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's just such a funny observation of people who are about that age.
Oh, Fallout! Really great! Woodstock!
Adrian Edmondson's Vivian character is all elements of The Young Ones, but pushed to the nth degree. He's just super pointlessly violent.
And I was a bit scared of Vivian, I think, as a little kid, because he didn't seem to know when to stop.
People always call Vivian the punk, but he wasn't meant to be a punk. He was meant to be someone who had just cherry-picked all the violent aspects of a lot of different cultures, so that he was a bit heavy metal, a bit punk.
We've got to remember Vivian is a medical student.
Yeah? Vivian, could I have an anaesthetic?
Of course you can!
And our experience of medical students in Manchester, where they had a big medical department, was that they were boorish, horrible, fighty, sweary people who are probably your consultant now.
Watch my trick, you bastards, or I'll kill you! Brilliant, eh?
And Vivian's interesting philosophically, I've always thought. What am I saying?
No, I mean a lead. This doesn't read.
The idea that, you know, I can't plug the telly in, or I can't get the plug to reach the wall. Therefore, I'll move the wall nearer to the telly rather than the telly nearer the wall, is an interesting kind of philosophy.
Oh, that's right, Vivian. If the mountain won't come to Mohammed, smash the drawing room to pieces. That's very Buddhist, isn't it?
It's born of thinking. You know, it's just thinking the other way round. Now, that makes him kind of exciting, I think.
Hello, Vivian. Oh, hello, Mum. Fancy seeing you here. I didn't know you lived in London.
Yeah, I love Vivian. You know, it's bizarre because I only played him for 12 episodes.
This is a friend of mine called Mike. This is a friend of mine called Neil.
Hello.
And that's a complete bastard I know called Rick.
A lot of fun, kind people say. It's the only character I've only played.
I wonder how many lentils I've ever eaten in my life.
Oh!
You have the quite mad punk Vivian Bastard. And then you have Neil the hippie, who is this extremely peace-loving figure, although in a satirical way.
Hey! I just had a great idea.
Well, the hippie character, Neil, in a bunch of losers, he's even more of the loser, because he's not obviously not the most aggressive. He isn't particularly vain, but it's another line to go down.
That's funny, I don't remember ramming a skewer into my head.
Nige, back then, he was such a hypochondriac, bless him. You know, everything was wrong. The bread was wrong. You know, there's too much dust in the studio. There's, you know, the light's hurting my eyes, all that sort of stuff. He's got over that now, but he was hard work back then. It's got to be said, and he'll admit that, I'm sure.
Character of Neil is kind of all my own toxic bits that you sort of splurge out onto everybody else.
Guys!
So there's a lot of me in Neil.
Guys! Listen, I've got something amazing to tell you.
Answer the phone, Neil. What? Answer the phone.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, floppy disks.
The kind of moaning.
We're only here on time because you kept me awake all night, pacing up and down and ringing bells.
Listen, man, sleep gives you cancer. Everyone knows that.
The whinging.
Just hang on a minute. Has it got any sugar in it?
Yes, a little bit. Yes, yes.
Oh, well, I can't because, like, you know, sugar rots your teeth and gives you brain damage.
And the kind of self-pitying manipulation of everybody else.
Guys, there's some dinner on the floor if you want it. If you don't like that, it'd also be cool, because, I mean, I only spent all day cooking it, right? And, like, I was the one who got it together to put the lentils on to soak last night, but maybe we should just get a cat, right, and give it to the cat, because it's obvious none of you can be bothered. Guys, I think it'd be cool if I just died, right?
All the sort of faults and flaws that I had at the time, Of course, I'm grown up now.
As well as the four housemates, there was, of course, the Bolosky family, all played by one very angry alternative comedian.
Hello, everybody! Hello, Mike, my little Thunderbird puppet. Thunderbirds are go, yeah? Come on, let's twist again.
I remember saying right away that just being an absolute prick and saying, I don't want to be like a single character. Like,
all right, somebody call a taxi.
I want to be like a multiplicity of characters. I don't want to be kind of, do like experimental and break the fourth wall.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, crazy, wacky landlord. I like very much your English punk rock stars, Your Lulu, your Dave Clark vibe. Oh, yes. I think they are FAB. That's English for stupid, yeah.
They came up with the idea of this loosely, of the landlord, Jerzy Bolofsky, which is a sort of weird kind of pun on Jersey, Bolofsky Jersey.
Oh, hello, pussycat. Here's your Uncle Billy. Here, what you doing in a bucket? Come on, everybody, let's play Daleks. Exterminate.
Alexei just used to stroll in and scare everyone and then just leave. It was gorgeous.
We would rehearse during the week, but Alexei wouldn't normally come to rehearsals because he was doing something else. So in the script, it would normally read Alexei's bit, and then you would kind of find out what he was going to do when he showed up on the day.
The only thing that unites us is Dr. Martin's boots. Dr. Martin gave his boots to the world so that everybody could be free. They're classless, matchless. He was just waterproof and retail for only £19.99p.
You have to remember that at the time we were all a bit scared of Alexei.
Because I'd been the authority figure in the club. They didn't know that. By then, I needed them more than they needed me, really, I was thinking. So I've always been very grateful. It brought me in front of a mass audience.
Hello, record boys!
And it wasn't just Alexei who got national exposure through the show.
Sorry, Governor. Apples and pears, tit for tat, I love London town, and I was at Violent's funeral.
They brought their mates from the Comedy Store with them, including Tony Allen, Keith Allen, Andy de la Tour.
Now, what happens if your car mounts the pavement?
And, of course, Dawn French.
Hello, everybody. I'm the Easter Bunny.
And Jennifer Saunders as knife-wielding femme fatale, Helen.
Still, at least my surname isn't Back. That'd be awful, wouldn't it? Helen Back. My surname is Mucus.
It was like a gang of mates had just turned up and were doing their thing. And, it was only later you realised, oh, my God, yes, that was Jennifer Saunders or any number of the other people that they had on the show. And these were the first time that we were seeing these people. And there was a whole new generation of really funny writer-performers coming through.
There was a pool of comedians that were alternative comedians. And because they were alternative comedians, there weren't that many of them, so they stuck together.
Torture victim is Gwendolyn!
And our first victim tonight is Spesspecker the Doll!
Everybody who was anywhere, when you look at it now, you go, the Oblivion Boys.
No, not Chopper. Jen. Big Jen? Right. Yeah. I'm his dad.
Helen Pace.
I bet in 1 second both my legs will fall off.
We're all in there somehow, just like tiny lines, but a group of people who were serving in many ways, or the fact the young ones got the big gig, and deservedly so.
Yeah, I think there was a definite feeling of, look, there's a whole gang of us, let's all get on telly.
Well, we had a row and I said something about the Pope.
It's a bit stupid, she's Catholic.
Yeah, I know she's Catholic. I didn't know the Pope was.
He just said to us, look, do you want to be in it? And we said, yeah, all right. And he said, well, do a bit of your own material if you want. So a lot of the times when we were on, it was our material, which was really nice because we were getting big laughs and we're using our material. Didn't get paid for it. Just saying. Just saying.
While the house had a constant stream of alternative comedians passing through, not many viewers spotted that there was an actual fifth housemate who could be seen randomly placed in the back of shot.
I do remember the fifth housemate, and I do remember the reason why we did it.
This is my favourite programme. It'll just be typical if it...
Oddly enough, we thought if anybody buys the VHS, for that's what there was around at the time, of this programme when it comes out, we want to give people something that perhaps they might have missed first time round. That if you roll backwards and forwards on the VHS, which of course you can't do when you watch the programme go out.
OK. You got them closed?
Yeah, ready.
You might spot something that perhaps people didn't spot.
Everyone talks about this fifth housemate.
So uncompromising these days.
I don't remember it because I didn't even know it was there in the first place.
This is revolting.
It was not that there was a fifth housemate, but just that there had been a party at this student house at some point in the past, and somebody had never left, so occasionally when you walked along you could see a girl sitting in the hall.
Viva el Presidente!
Coming up, more insight into the making of The Young Ones, including some very rare footage which has never been shown on British TV before.
I said you complete wanker. That's what I thought you said. I didn't know you were allowed to say wanker on television.
It's great seeing outtakes, isn't it? It's marvellous.
Welcome back. We're celebrating the most anarchic, imaginative and incendiary sitcom ever created.
But they just went for, let's blow everything up. If some cupboard going to fall off the wall, the whole wall would come down. If a fight was going to break out, they weren't just going to slap each other. They were going to actually, apparently kill each other.
It was unshootable. I mean, it was full of all the stuff that we eventually did shoot, but your first reaction was, well, we can't do this.
On paper, The Young Ones was a cartoon comedy world where anything could happen. But they had to perform each scene and stunt in front of a live studio audience.
Oh, no! The front door's exploded!
It got ridiculous. At one stage was a sequence where we actually had a lion taming act in the television studio. And I was beginning to think, well, I've seen some stuff, but this is unbelievable.
By today's standards, it was actually extremely dangerous, what we were doing. There was very little health and safety.
We didn't have a health and safety department in those days. I'm not saying we did anything unsafe, but there wasn't anybody saying, I want to test this out before it happens.
And they had to concentrate on what they were doing because there were so many explosions going on and so many sort of, quite carefully timed special effects and quite dangerous stunts that were happening that you can't just muck about. If you're going to whack someone round the back of the head with a frying pan, you've got to be in exactly the right position. Otherwise, you're completely scuppered.
We had a 9-man special effects team who you could go to the day before a live recording and ask to make a series of ridiculous and expensive props which they probably had never made before, a sofa that turned into a coffin, a brick that exploded when you bit it.
Some of these bricks explode! That's good, isn't it?
They made a brick out of Ryvita, and they put a compressed air gas canister into it, and I bit into it, and they blow it up, and of course it really hurt me.
There were quite a lot of injuries and accidents, yes. The one I remember the most of all, we kept in, which is the cooker that explodes, and Rick sort of going back in slow motion from it.
Suppose we should just have to cook our own supper.
And I think that even surprised the special effects department.
They loaded it before lunch. It was a lunch break. And they came back and somebody didn't know it had been already loaded, so they put another load in.
I think they'd meant a little like that, and it was a massive proper, die-hard explosion right in his face.
The two I remember were the blowing up of the gas stove when Rick tries to light the stove, and the falling through the bed when Rick and Ada are fighting in the bed.
It was pretty terrifying. I mean, it's one of those things where it's not easy to rehearse. You just have to do it. Basically, the bed was hoisted up into the grid, out of the view of the camera, and then on a cue, the release button goes.
Remember, we really hurt ourselves because we're working with some weird stuntmen. They were what they thought was going to happen didn't always happen. I remember clunking my head on a bit of wood as we landed. It was a bed full of boxes, so there was some kind of cushioning in it and the thing. But it dropped from more or less the height of this kind of studio, a good 20 feet. And then we carried on. Of course, you got a huge cheer,
They were ridiculous things to do live, really, but we wanted to. And it takes some bottle, because in both cases, the dialogue goes straight on. And I just loved that. I loved the ability of the visual effects guys. I loved the bravery of the actors. It was magic to be there.
God, that was brilliant. A bit scratchy. Have a look at it back. Reset. Cue it. Brilliant. No question about that for you.
They were fearless, just threw themselves about.
We were obsessed with entertaining a studio audience.
Have spent over a year in the same field.
We were very keen to get people laughing properly and to be a live show, that was recorded and then played out. So we tried very hard to make a lot of the stunts work, dead live, which is really exciting.
This was a programme that relied on audience feedback and the audience enjoying it and understanding it. Don't forget, when an audience came to see the young ones being done, they had never seen anything.
We had a kind of compunction to entertain the TV audience, the audience that was sitting there watching the recording.
Hands up, who likes me?
We were very new. We didn't know. We just thought it was our job to kind of entertain, and we enjoyed it. It's good fun messing about with cameras.
I said you complete wanker. That's what I thought you said. I didn't know you were allowed to say wanker on television.
Oh, it's great seeing outtakes, isn't it? It's marvellous.
What happens? Yes! Sorry, folks. Oh, well, then you're probably not Dr. Kildare, then, are you? Sorry.
Not love, Neil! God, that sounds far too much like come and get it like a fucking bitch sex machine.
Yeah, you're right.
That'll never get out, will it?
I did notice that it was mostly Adrian, wasn't it? Messing up, really.
Neil, can you kill... Oh, fuck it, sorry.
Come on, it was all Adrian, really.
There's plenty of people standing around with fire extinguishers. So the fact that there's a fire going on just behind me I kind of enjoyed that, rather than, get scared.
You fascist junta!
The sound effect is what makes it so funny, because the sound effects are ridiculous.
Impossible!
If somebody's hitting the bollocks with a cricket bat, you kind of want to hear it. So the sound department would prepare a load of sound effects and would fire them in live, and you get a much bigger reaction. It's much funnier.
Traitor!
So I think the cricket bat in the bollocks was a real cricket bat smashing a watermelon to pieces. That's the perfect effect.
Mike, you bastard!
We knew that you could get a good joke by banging your head. There's nothing funnier than violence.
We went for deliberate childishness as well, and kind of cartoons where someone could get hit on the head with a frying pan and get a flat head, and then, they wouldn't have any permanent damage. And I think also it was probably the only way we could get away with the violence as well, is to emphasise the cartoon nature of it.
In cartoons, they can be forced down a drain pipe, or they can be chopped into lots of pieces by a meat cleaver, an automatic meat cleaver, and things like that. And we were just trying to kind of get a bit of that.
Sort of extreme version of Laurel and Hardy, with people smacking each other. And... There's been nothing like it really since.
Well, there are one or two exceptions.
Can't speak for Vic and Bob, but, yes, when you see them sitting at a desk whacking each other with heavy frying pans... There's no way that you can't say, well, no, they never saw the young ones. I'm not saying, and I don't think for a moment they saw that and thought, let's do that. But I think it did open up avenues for people to think, well, yes, we could, anything goes.
When we recorded The Young Ones, this was pre-CGI. There were very, very basic special effects. And what started out as being perhaps a bit of a problem became its joy.
What have you done, turned it into a roller disco?
Uncanny. I'd look at scenes now and think, that's really embarrassing. There's like a roller disco with 3 people in it and bad disco lighting. But, and a wobbly set. But, that was sort of part of it as well, that it all looked a bit, shitty and handmade.
Sometimes I really wish that I was a fly on the wall.
I suppose that I would too if I wasn't one already. Who are you?
We're just the fly-on-the-wall documentary film crew, OK?
We wasted a whole afternoon once getting a chip and a carrot to skate on a plate, which took about 4 hours. And I remember saying at the end of that, OK, we're not doing that again, guys.
I don't know why the bits are in there. I think it was just an attempt to be weird.
You want to drink with me? It helps you forget.
And also to say, we're not just a normal sitcom, You don't know where you are with us.
There he is, Vivian! Get him! Do you know what my favourite vegetables are? Peas, 5 peas, 10 peas, 50 peas.
Some of those inserts were kind of fun, and some of them are just, if you look at it now, I think, some of them are just stupid.
You're as like as 2 peas.
I hate that expression. It's so patronising.
But perhaps surprisingly, not everyone was a fan.
We had 4 really funny characters. So why bother ruining it with these arch attempts to do cult?
I'll see you, Jimmy. Well, I got the 7 of spades, you.
The cult was in the 4 of them. It was in that was the new thing. 4 horrible characters bitching and fighting, farting their way through life. That was the fun, not some bloody tomatoes.
Just got to catch up with
Coming up, we see how the young ones divided the audience.
I thought that was the biggest load of rubbish I've ever seen on television, quite honestly.
How it became a cult is bizarre.
(1982), and The Young Ones has just been broadcast for the first time. When reviewed by mainstream media, the show usually divided the room between those who got it and those who didn't.
If it was noticed at all by the business, for example, reviews and that kind of thing, it was pretty universally derided.
First, we're going to discuss The Young Ones.
I thought that was the biggest load of rubbish I've ever seen on television, quite honestly. And I'm not exaggerating when I say ever. I think it was a waste of licence money.
In my memory, it was watched by very few people. I think the audience figures are something like 1.5 million. How it became a cult is bizarre.
Time for me
just because you never buy around.
Unaware of the growing popularity in the playgrounds and common rooms around the country, Rick, Aid and Nigel went on tour with Roland Rivron's band, Ken Bishop's Nice 12.
We turned up in Nottingham and there was something like 5,000 people outside that didn't have tickets that were trying to get in. It was so underplayed. They didn't realise quite what an appeal they had across the country.
The tour was originally booked off the back of another of Rick Mayall's comedy creations, Kevin Turvey, but the public had other ideas.
I remember feeling right on it, you know. It was a really funny version. Why don't you all...
Back off!
We felt like we were a band.
Think what we all thought.
The amount of energy Rick's putting out, it just looks impossible. Aid and I, you know, we're also putting some energy out, but Rick's is just off the scale. It's incredible.
Not my fucking generation.
You know, because we're London-based, you don't really get an idea of what people are doing up in Nottingham and Leeds and Hull and all that. You turn up there and people were just going completely bonkers. And it was like, wow, we've really underestimated this.
It was a lesson in how powerful the telly is, having been in people's living rooms.
What is that little white dot?
It's a little white dot.
Oh, very clever.
Must be really old telly.
What, hippie?
No, it's a sign, that little white dot. It means something really heavy. It means there's no more telly. It's time to go to bed.
Shortly after the series had finished, BBC came to us and said we'd like to release the series on 2 VHSs. By this time, I'd gone back to doing another series of 2 Ronnies. The 2 Ronnies used to get about 18 million viewers, and the VHSs sold about 100,000. Young Ones got 3 million viewers, and the VHSs sold about 1 million.
I'm sure that the video recorder played a part in it. People would write to us and that, you know, they would have watched a particular bit again and again and tried to analyse it. It allowed people to become slightly obsessive about it.
I've heard of people recording it on those little push-button tape recorders, not the visual, just the audio, holding it up to the telly so that they could remember all the lines and then learn them and do them at school. And that's kind of where it caught on, really. And by the time, you know, their parents heard it, it was too late.
Alternative comedy was the new rock and roll. But it wasn't just because of the young ones. On Channel 4, Peter Richardson's comic strip collective had continued making short films, including this contemporary of Spinal Tap, Bad News.
They had this beautiful thing where the BBC, they were doing no holds barred anarchic comedy, slapstick stuff, and then on Channel 4, under the helm of Peter Richardson, they were doing the Comic Strip Presents, where they were able to write these half-hour and hour beautifully crafted comedies.
Stop! What's the matter? You're supposed to come in there, Colin.
All I'm asking, Bim, is that you let me sing just one number.
Yeah, I know. And I say you can't, OK?
Well, it's just not fair.
Look, this is my band, so it's fair.
Well, if that's the way it is, it's my brother's PA, and I say that you all can't use it.
The only reason you're in this band is because you've got the bloody PA.
So it was the same gang, virtually, yeah, on both channels, competing with ourselves.
Well, the comic strips are written by different people, you know. So quite a lot of the comic strip was written by Pete, who's a kind of has a particular style, very different to the young ones.
Yeah, what time did you call this then?
Oh, I smashed the window, Spider. Sorry.
Never mind then. It's all anarchy, isn't it?
Look, are you ready now, then?
No, sorry. I've got to go and sign on at 10:30.
What?
No. Joke, get
it? While Channel 4 was the comic strip's natural home,
heavy metal, top of the class, stuff the media up your arse.
Back at Auntie Beeb, the growing comedy cult status of the young ones meant they also wanted more. And in 1984, the second series was launched.
Once in every lifetime,
mean, the fact that it was slightly delayed maybe helped us because people were even more keen to see it. And I think episode for episode, it's a slightly better series.
That's what we agreed when we first came. You do the cooking, I'll look after the plants and the goldfish.
Yeah. And what did you make me cook on that first day?
Sausages. It was a Tuesday.
Yeah. Sausages and...
Sausages and plants and goldfish.
The second set of scripts were tighter, more ambitious in some ways, but more practical in other ways. And I think also they were working together better. They'd seen what did work and what didn't work.
How's that, Mike?
Nice one, Viv. Time for tea. You win.
The stories got better. I think it got more satisfying. We just got that little bit better. It was less shambolic.
There's something I've been meaning to tell all of you for some time. I went to see the doctor today, and, well, I think I'm pregnant.
And with cult TV show status, the writers were able to get guests on the new series who weren't just mates from the Comedy Store.
As well as it just trying to, find jobs for all our friends and put them in it, we could, ask Terry Jones to be a guest in it, people that we really kind of loved and admired.
Ashes to ashes.
Funk to funky, we know Major, Tom's a junkie.
As well as having a python on board, the second series also featured Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones from the groundbreaking sketch show team Not the 9 O'Clock News, who many saw as forerunners to alternative comedy.
I like the bit where you shoved a drill in the Virgin Otter's face.
It wasn't in Bambi, Vivian.
It was in the sequel, Neil. Bambi goes crazy, ate bonkers with his drill and sex.
Is that true, Bambi? Did you do a Disney nasty?
The idea of having 3 or 4 generations of comedians all in the same thing is a beautiful and lovely thing. That's a great little baton pass back to the late 60s, early 70s.
It seemed the young revolutionaries were quickly becoming part of the comedy establishment. Or were they?
We got invited to the BBC Christmas party, which was a huge event and very exciting for us.
There's Ronnie Barker and Ronnie Corbett, and there is, all the great luminaries of BBC entertainment.
Roland and Ade got completely drunk, and the entire party was just a nightmare of trying to stop anything too disastrous happening. It culminated in Roland getting his knob out and showing it to Penelope Keith, I think.
It's difficult to remember precisely what happened, but there was a lot of places we weren't allowed to go back to. I like to think Rick was to blame.
Music!
Maybe they weren't ready for comedy respectability quite yet. They kicked off the second series with the BAFTA-winning Bambi, where the 4 housemates from Scumbag College take on the Toffs on University Challenge.
It's a rotten shame. I went to see the careers officer in Big College yesterday, and he said that all he got left was chairman of British Rail. Well, I wanted to be Director General of the BBC.
Yeah, it's rotten. They gave it to Scapper just because he directed our world tour of Hamlet and wrote our hilarious review, What Ho Dark.
Yeah, it's a weird idea of what Oxbridge people are, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to smash the oiks. Daddy's got a Porsche.
Hello and welcome to another edition of University Challenge. This week, the teams represent Footlights College, Oxbridge. Yes, that's the spirit.
Stephen Fry and Emma Thompson and whatnot doing their very poshest accents versus the sort of scumbags above them was a hilarious contrast and a bit of a comment on the nature of younger working class and middle class people appearing on the comedy scene.
What is the chemical equation?
I've got a Porsche.
Yes, well, that's not exactly what I've got written on the card, but I knew your father, so Footlights see by 25.
Daddy sends hugs.
But not everyone in the young ones' camp was happy to be associated with the Footlights Brigade.
Mel Smith was there playing the security guard. And I said, what's he doing, And then they said, Griff's in, and Hugh's in, and Emma's in, and Stephen. And I said, but aren't these people the enemy? You know, this Oxbridge fringe.
So you're starting for 10, no confirm.
And they just said, no, that's you. That's just you.
He always had a suspicion of us because he had this kind of unionist, hard Stalinist, Leninist background. And we were far too middle class to be able to have ideas.
Achtung!
It's not an automatic.
Fair enough.
Hey, I'm depressed. It's 9 below zero.
He's blummin' right, you know.
There were all so many different kind of accidents that made it kind of perhaps groovier than we thought.
It was made in the variety department, not the comedy department. And I did that very purposely because you got 2 days in the studio in variety. In comedy, you only got 1 day in the studio.
It got a funding from the variety arm of the BBC budget, which meant it had to have a band in each week. So it wasn't us putting a band in, it had to have a band in. And therefore we got a young band in, so we always got a groovy band in.
But I think for the audience as well, that having a live band in the studio kind of lifted the atmosphere. It energised everybody. You know, we got to pick bands we liked to be in it.
Any band that was, was feisty and energetic, all those bands really fitted in seamlessly with the sort of vague anarchy and the sort of energy that was going on.
Motorhead were very easy and sweet.
Most camera aware and professional in terms of where the cables would go, which camera was on, lead guitarist forward, lead singer forward, back. Lemmy was in charge of the band and seemed to me very professional.
The bands were important when they added to the story. I had Madness go playing in a pub, and the idea was that there was a bridge between a scene that happened in the house and a scene that happened in the pub, and while Madness was playing, I was able to do the progress through the streets and all that kind of stuff.
Good morning, miss. Can I help you, son?
Where it gets harder to justify is when somebody opens the bathroom and there's Dex's Midnight Runners standing in the bath.
Point 3. Dex's Midnight Runners playing free daily in the university library.
Well, I told it to set up in our lavatory.
I couldn't tell you why they're in the bath, apart from the very banal reason was the fact that probably was the set that wasn't used before and after. So by having them in the bathroom was ludicrous, but it was also probably a practical necessity.
There were other bands who were a bit more all over the place.
Only pop music can save us now!
I got a call from a secretary who said, I've got a Mr. Scabies on the phone for you. And he said that they were prepared to reform the Damned, who'd broken up, to record one song called Evil Nasty for the show. So they recorded the song in the studio, which all went well, and afterwards we went out to have a curry at an Indian restaurant. One of the band members, Captain Sensible, had his own song in the charts previously called Happy Talk, and he decided to sing it on the table in the middle of the Indian restaurant. And the rest of the band didn't really like him or it, so they started throwing onion barges at him. And he got all upset. There was a huge fight in the Indian restaurant, and the whole band broke up, and that was the end of it. So the Damned basically reformed to specifically do one song for the young ones and then bust up in an Indian restaurant 2 days later.
Coming up, we see why they included bizarre images in the middle of the shows. And why the BBC stopped them from putting in the final one.
The BBC got a phenomenal number of complaints.
When the second series was broadcast in 1984, Margaret Thatcher had been in power for 5 years. There had been a war with Argentina, miners' strikes and riots. The nation was divided, and there was no doubt which side the young ones were on.
It was comedy about the people that were reacting against society. It was like, almost ridiculing with those people that thought they were really right on.
Back to Victorian values! I hope you're satisfied, Thatcher!
Margaret Thatcher sort of supplanted the mother-in-law. So we no longer did mother-in-law jokes, but people would make jokes about Margaret Thatcher.
And the character who became the embodiment of the anti-Thatch brigade was sociology student Rick.
Neil, the bathroom's free, unlike the country under the Thatcherite junta.
Ben radicalised Rick as a politically minded kind of anarchist.
I think it was brilliant to make Rick's character just go on about Thatcher.
Thatcher's Britain. Thatcher's bloody Britain.
In its targets, the young ones takes on Thatcher.
Honestly, whenever anything explodes in this house, it's always blame Vivian!
Who do you suggest we blame?
Thatcher!
But the more traditional area from which it got a great deal of material was the old-fashioned, bland BBC TV sitcoms.
Just in time to watch Oh Crikey on ITV.
No! Child had fallen down the doctor in the sitting room. Lucky the vicar didn't see.
A grade 3 horror was that the vicar might pop round unexpectedly. And all those things are very brutally sent up in The Young Ones.
Hold still.
What The Young Ones did was to say you can take a very conventional form, the Fletcher sitcom, and you can rip it apart, you can tear it apart.
We wanted to break the mould of other sitcoms, so it was very easy to parody other sitcoms.
No! I'm not watching the bloody good life! Bloody!
To so explicitly criticise another TV comedy as a 14-year-old, you're like, oh my God, they really hate each other.
I hate it! It's so bloody nice!
I assumed all comedians knew each other and that they probably all lived in a house. And it was just so thrilling to watch someone just not care what another comedian might think of him.
Felicity, Treacle, Kendall, and Richard, sugar-flavoured snob bars!
It's just exciting, isn't it? Especially when you're that age. Because you assume that all adults get on.
They're nothing but a couple of reactionary stereotypes confirming the myth that everyone in Britain is a lovable, middle-class eccentric, and I hate them!
That was a highly articulate outburst, Vivian. I only hope they're not watching.
I did a series with Richard Bryars some years after The Young Ones. The first day we had a conversation about it. And I think I said The Good Life stands up better.
In terms of parody, we weren't afraid to parody youth programmes as well.
And now let's shake some action here on 2 with a new programme for young adults. Nose in, around.
There's this scene where Ben Elton's playing like this cool, sort of hip, youth sort of TV presenter.
I expect, like us, you're not into all that stuff your old man's into, right? So, we just thought we'd have a programme for us, right? And this is it, nosing around.
It was taking the piss out of the shows that the BBC were putting on as youth programmes that we were all too sophisticated to actually fall for.
Really great! Hi! Well, I'm standing up here on this scaffolding because that's what this programme is all about. Shock! Yeah, right, OK.
And Rick kicks the telly in. And I remember thinking, yeah, a lot of the telly that's designed for me makes me want to kick the telly in.
The kids are united. We will never be divided. Did you see that? Did you? The voice of youth. They're still wearing flared trousers.
The young ones were kicking in the conventions of television, doing anything they could to challenge established norms.
Yes, yes,
We were constantly trying to mess with it, you know.
Neil, I hate you.
Oh, well,
Don't bring me down and hassle me, Rick. I'm really confused. I'm just not feeling myself today.
You could do a really good joke, couldn't you, about feelings?
Shut up, or I'll kill you.
Okay, guys, come on. As the one guy said to the other guy who was getting fed up, I'm getting fed up. I want to wash my smalls, and I don't mean dip my tiddlies in a glass of water.
All those weird asides, some of them worked, some of them didn't, but they generally just gave it the sense of newness and difference.
One of my favourite bits, we're in the dressing room, and we're playing these actors who are playing the characters.
I hate him.
He drinks like a fish. Well, he's got no talent. Alexi who?
The kind of creativity of that, the daring of that was remarkable, really.
It challenged the sitcom form, so people started playing with the form a lot more. You even see that now through to Mrs. Brown, where she breaks the fourth wall. That kind of comes, from the young ones started breaking the fourth wall and talking direct to the camera.
I'm so hungry I could eat my own earwax. And we all know how horrid that tastes. Right, kids?
Breaking the fourth wall, speaking and looking at camera and confiding in camera was all part of the whole package of what The Young Ones was about.
This is actually very serious.
They're breaking character and they're breaking the fourth wall and they're talking to the audience in the studio, but they're also sort of like talking to the audience back at home.
I just really felt that you got to know Alexi Sale.
I'm a Marxist comedian, but since I've been doing a lot of television, a lot of me Marxist friends have accused me of selling out, like they make me march at the back on demos, He
didn't care about convention. He didn't even care about the sitcom he was in. That he would just stop the plot to talk about something else.
So, honest to God, I have not sold out. Anyway, round about now, I usually have a pot noodle, yeah?
When you watch it, it just feels like that anything goes, really, and that, and it feels really exciting and sort of a little bit dangerous.
But it wasn't Vivian, Rick, or Alexi who got their knuckles rapped by BBC bosses, but Uber producer Paul Jackson, who came up with the idea of subverting not just the sitcom, but TV itself.
We'd heard that students were obsessing over the VHSs.
Have we got a video? Yes, we've got a video!
The flash frames was a silly thing, really. I thought to myself, well, let's try and give them a little something, a little private joke for the real fans. It was just pictures. There was a jumping frog, there was a dripping tap, there was a big end credits from a cowboy movie. We put them in to see if anybody would notice or say anything, and assuming that probably it would get picked up, then people would start to try and freeze frame on the VHS, which would be a long process.
The BBC got a phenomenal number of complaints and people accusing us of trying to brainwash them and make them buy things or do things.
And so Bill Cotton, who was the head of the whole thing, called me into his office and he said, what is this nonsense you've been putting flash frames? And I started to explain. I said, yeah, well, yes, Bill. And then the very last episode, which was the only episode that hadn't broadcast, we're going to have one frame which says something like, I never wanted these stupid flash frames in the first place, Ed Wooden. Shut up and do what you're told, farty breath. So that would have been the punchline to the whole thing. It was actually a constructed joke over the 6 episodes, but we were never allowed to punch it.
I've been waiting here half an hour. Half a bloody hour, Neil. Being hungry, waiting for my tea and listening to that bogey bum.
I'll tell you another weird thing about why it may have caught on is that because it was about students, I think school kids liked it. And bizarrely, I think they enjoyed the language. And the language was forced on us by kind of censorship, so we couldn't say very many rude words. I think we could say bastard, so we said it a lot.
You bastard! You utter bastard! Wow! What a complete bastard!
Things like ploppy pants and, ruddy, and, it made Rick into a kind of more Puritan kind of thing because he wouldn't swear.
Scaredy cat, sitting on the doormat, all the little doggy wogs will have a little bit of it.
It's the kind of language at the playground, really, when teachers are about and you're not allowed to swear. So we're kind of copying their behaviour, using other words.
This is it! It's really happening!
Who needs qualifications? Who cares about Thatcher and unemployment? We can do just exactly whatever we want to do. And do you know why? Because we're young ones. Bachelor boys. Crazy, mad, wild-eyed, big-bottomed anarchists!
At the end of the second series, in typical Young Ones style, the writers simply drove them off a cliff in a homicidal homage to the Cliff Richard film Summer Holiday.
I think it's right they stopped after 2. I was relieved, to finish in a way, but I think it was the right decision.
I mean, I always felt that they should have done more. We should have done more.
We just thought we'd done that and that we weren't short of other ideas. We didn't see that you had to kind of mine your success forever and ever.
I'm on board the Freedom Bus, heading for Good Time City, and I haven't even paid my fare!
I think probably 2 series was probably, let's draw a line under it and kill them all.
Look out!
That's my favourite scene in that bus. I remember the day shooting it, and we all went back where the camera was and saw a London bus actually go over a cliff and crump at the end and explode.
The young ones were lying at the bottom of a cliff in a burning bus.
That was close!
But after the break, what they did next, and how Aid went up in flames when a Dangerous Brothers stunt went horribly wrong.
And I'm saying things like, "Put me out, you bastards," and they're thinking, "Oh, hilarious."
It's 1985, and the young ones are dead.
That was close!
Sort of. But Rick and Aid are resurrecting their earlier act, the Dangerous Brothers, cranking up the danger on new alternative comedy show Saturday Live, hosted by none other than Young Ones writer Ben Elton.
What are you clapping? We haven't done anything yet, for God's sake. Everyone at home thinking, what a bunch of sycophantic hypocrites. I don't know.
The idea of Saturday Live was, if you like, to complete the legacy that had started with the Young Ones by providing a variety show that felt different and was different, and again was aimed at a particular target audience that we felt hadn't been catered for by mainstream television.
You got Julian Clary and Joe Brand and the Oblivion Boys and Ben Elton, of course. So there was a new energy about stand-up then.
My name is Richard Dangerous, and this is Sir Adrian Dangerous. And this is Vim.
But even in the edgy early days of Channel 4, TV bosses weren't prepared to let these two into people's homes without some sort of safety net.
Apart from one episode, ours was the only pre-record, simply because it had so much violence in it and occasionally a crocodile.
Richard, there is a live crocodile in the studio. I am going home now. Good night.
I remember watching them rehearse. I thought they were going to kill each other. They used to rehearse in the car park.
Now you keep quiet while I set fire to you.
I do remember the Tower Inferno, because I remember it going wrong.
Everybody keep quiet while he set fire to me.
We decided we needed a safe word if things were going wrong. I said, I'll probably play with it like this and pretend it's gone out of control. So don't rush in thinking that I'm in trouble. If I am in trouble, I'll shout out the secret word. So they set fire to me, and I'm doing all this.
You bastard! You promised you wouldn't do that! Thinking you're ruining your back.
And I can't remember the safe word. And I'm saying things like, "Put me out, you bastards." And they're thinking, "Oh, hilarious." He hasn't said the word yet. He must be fine.
Well, viewers, can you spot what went wrong?
I lost quite a lot of nasal hair, my eyebrows and eyelashes. Probably several years of my life. All for comedy.
While the Dangerous Brothers were burning brightly on Channel 4, there were notable sightings of the four housemates back together. In 1986, the Young Ones reformed, adding an unlikely member for comic relief.
Pull on your dancing trousers and get down to the total and utter king of rock and roll, Cliff Richard!
Got myself a crying, talking.
We were all a bit embarrassed because the series sort of takes the piss out of him a bit.
Oh, Cliff! Sometimes it must be difficult not to feel as if you really are a cliff when fascists keep trying to push you over it.
Are they the lemmings, or are you Cliff? Or are you Cliff?
But then you're in the studio, you're looking through the glass, and you realise, oh no, he really does sound like that. He's got that voice, isn't he? That's amazing. That's an incredible voice he's got. And we're all sitting there a bit in awe of Cliff, for real.
I do remember him taking his cans off when I was shouting my bits too loud for his ears.
He satisfies my soul.
What does this button do?
I'm not convinced that the Cliff Richard fans rushed out to buy the Living Doll single, and probably were slightly miffed that Cliff had got involved in this sort of thing, but I say good on Cliff Richard.
If you don't buy this record, then you're all utter.
Living Doll was a #1 hit, but fans of the Young Ones wanted more episodes. Instead, they got Young Ones, The Next Generation.
They came up with a very simple idea. We wrote The Young Ones about university when we were at university. Why don't we write about the fringes of showbiz?
Did you get laid 9 months ago, and more specifically to a rather young popsy who claimed to be a fan? That should have made you suspicious for a start!
They're playing showbiz characters as an agent, and they've got this big apartment, and it's his slightly self-conscious thing about this is what it's like to be famous and a personality.
Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, it certainly had its moments, but the better moments were all a bit like ones that you'd have got in the Young Ones.
I said, wait here! A bit of a different tone now, isn't it?
I think people wanted it to be more of the Young Ones, and it was a bit, but not enough.
Look, we've got two problems. There's no food, and the Nolans. What are we going to do? Eat the Nolans!
It becomes clear in retrospect that that was Rick and Aid building up to do Bottom, really. And they cut away my character and all the rest of the extraneous showbiz stuff. They realised, oh, we don't need that. We just need the two of us, you know, hitting each other with saucepans.
I think Bottom is probably the child of the Young Ones. You know, the anarchic quality of the Young Ones.
No!
The two of them are instinctive. They're brilliant at fighting each other. Bathroom cabinets picked up, smashed over their heads. They're beating each other senseless.
It seemed Rick and Aid enjoyed trying to kill each other, and not just on TV.
Get this, Tony!
They took the award-winning Bottom on the road in 5 sell-out national tours.
Rick was the best reactor to being hit. I used to kick him in the bollocks quite a lot on stage, and he would do this kind of thing like that, which seems really odd to do, you know, arms and legs going like that. But it's really effective.
Their popularity inevitably saw them absorbed into the mainstream, though occasional flashes of comedy anarchy could still be seen.
You're the daughter I never had, Rebecca.
Nigel Planer has regularly reunited with the old gang.
Yeah, the comic strip's still going. We made a film year before last with Maxine Peake called Red Top. I played Rupert Murdoch.
We've got an election coming up next month. Have you decided who you want as Prime Minister?
So the comic strip carries on.
Chris Ryan has been playing aliens in Doctor Who, while Aid Edmondson has also been spotted in a galaxy far, far away in the latest Star Wars epic. Ben Elton has had success after comedy success in stand-up, sitcoms, novels, and even stage musicals.
Every night, 7:30, I'd walk here and wait for her to come to that very bedroom window.
And Rick's role as Greg Davis's dad in Man Down was as risque as anything he'd done.
That is one of the most romantic stories I've ever heard. I know. Seems crazy now, doesn't it? Anyway, all's well that ends well. Eventually, I fucked her against that wall. What? Yeah, that very wall.
I just don't think Rick Mayall is capable of a bad performance. Any of the stuff he did, if Rick Mayall is in it, it's like a British kite mark, seal of approval.
In 2014, the nation mourned when, after a fatal heart attack, we lost the people's poet. He was just 56.
It's awful for all of us having lost Rick. But I think that he had a really great life, you know, and he did mostly what he wanted to do.
He was an immense talent, you know. He had funny bones, as you know, to comic cliche.
Yeah. I'm not very good at soppy television.
When Rick was awarded an honorary doctorate by Exeter University in 2008, he used the ceremony to share with his fellow students what life had taught him.
Let me give you youngsters a present. 5 mantras to carry with you through your lives. Number 1, all men are equal. Therefore, no one can ever be your genuine superior.
You fascist junta!
Number 2, your future is as bright as you make it.
Yeah, come on, everyone. Let all your hairs hang out. Do whatever you want.
Number 3, change is a constant of life. So you must never, ever lose your wisdom.
The world's stupidest bottom burp, Vivian Britton.
Number 4, if you want to live a full and complete human life, you have to be free.
I'm on board the Freedom Bus, heading for Good Time City, and I haven't even paid my fare.
And number 5, love is the answer. You go out there and have yourselves a fucking good life.
After he died, someone said, oh, he was a gentleman who didn't behave in any way like his characters off screen and was just totally calm and professional. And that's just, you couldn't get further from the truth.
I just knew you were going to say that.
In 1982, the young ones stormed the bastion of the BBC, the home of the suburbanite sitcom. And after they left in 1984, comedy was never the same again.
With television comedy, you can pretty much draw the line before the young ones and after the young ones.
Quite often when you look back on something in the past, you think, oh, it was outrageous in its time. You look back and then you think, oh, it doesn't seem so outrageous now. But I think the young one still stands up.
I don't think you could have helped but be influenced by the young ones. It just exploded in such a way, and every young person watched it and felt it was for them.
It was such a unique show. As a generation of performers, we were the first of a new kind of comedy, and so all the other performers have kind of followed on from us.
I think the young ones changed comedy. It made a big space for new ideas, and it encouraged lots of young comedians as well to think, well, right, there's something in this new school of comedy.
Everything felt a little bit different after the young ones.
It gave everybody an opportunity to be a bit braver. I think it was a turning point from traditional comedy, if you want to say it like that, to something more exciting.
I don't think anyone ever starts off thinking, oh, we're going to be revolutionary. You start making something because you like making things. We were just trying to have fun. I haven't seen it for donkey's years.